give it a second.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's the Pipeline Report here from Shreveport, Louisiana. Pastor Tim Carskadden, along with my son, Zach Carskadden. We come to you each Monday at 12 noon Central Time with the Pipeline Report. We're asking the Lord to use us to vet the news and kind of speak to you as intercessors on how to pray concerning the events in America. Today we have some important issues. We're calling it August. It is the Valley of Decision. There are so many issues that we're dealing with this month that we think it's critical that the intercessors are on the wall praying according to what we feel like the Lord's will is concerning. Today we're going to talk about Israel. We have a lot of things going on. They're threatening to take over the Gaza Strip. The Israelis are. The world uproar, anti-Semitism, the whole Gaza issue, as well as the redistricting battle that still continues with the Texas legislators still hiding out in Illinois and New York, California. We have that issue coming on, as well as some of the other issues. We saw President Trump had a conference call today talking about the taking over D.C., a emergency injunction that he put in today. So we're going to talk about all those things. So tune in to the Pipeline Report today. Well, good day. As I said, we're so glad I'm still muted. There we go. Unmute me. There we go. So glad you're with us today. Again, we are coming to you today from our new renovated studio here at Christian Center Shreveport with my son Zach here to my right, probably your left on the screen. We have some of our background we put together. We still got some more work to do, but we're working on it. We're working on lighting and everything else. So thank you. Personally, I want to thank you because many of you sowed into the Pipeline Report and our podcasting apps and everything. And we've used those resources to remodel this entire room. We're going to have about 3 or 4 sets in here. Maybe we'll do a little video sometime of what it looks like without the camera right here and kind of gives you an idea. Because I want you to know that what you sowed, your seed into this ministry, is being used to help propagate what God's told us to put out there. And we're so excited about that. We're looking forward to using the studio more and more. We're going to do some live streaming. Hopefully our goal is to start having online classes, etc. And it'll be filmed in this room. So we're glad for that. So thank you again for sowing. Well, let's always start with Israel. And we want to start there and pick up on what's going on there. There's so many things happening right now. Now, the Knesset under Benjamin Netanyahu had a vote, a decision that they are going to take over portions of Gaza for protection, for security, also distribution of goods, as well as rebuilding, because the whole Gaza Strip's in rubble, and they want to rebuild the buildings, apartments, etc. Now, this is not going really well as far as the world is concerned and what they're seeing this as. So we're going to play a few clips here from Prime Minister Netanyahu and what he's saying, because he's having to battle a propaganda battle in the midst of this. And we must stand on the wall to pray that this would be a smooth transition. Now, I'm trying not to be too political on this issue, but let's go biblical. When we talk about what God told Abraham, freezing up. Okay, there you go. What he told Abraham, the boundaries of Israel would be, it's described there in Genesis, and Gaza is in that description. So I'm not here to say we're taking over a land to fulfill that mandate, but it is part of the mandate. So we have to see what the Lord's up to in this situation. So he was asked in a press conference in English, so we could watch some of it, about what the world leaders are talking about, saying to him about that? Okay, let's play one clip here.
I think there's an issue here. And the issue is many leaders tell me, look, we know you're right, but we can't stand, in the face of the public opinion in our country, especially European leaders. They tell me that over and over again. And I say, that is your problem. It is not our problem. It is not our problem.
And I think he's absolutely right that it's not his problem, it's theirs. So that leads us into another problem that's occurring right now. This week, Australia is about to announce that they're going to declare a Palestinian state. The UK has done it. France has done it. Canada has done it. Now, this is biblically very dangerous because in Joel chapter 3, he talks about the Valley Decision, which is the title of our live stream today. It talks about how the nations that come against Israel, the Lord says, I will come against you, those who want to divide up the land. So we are seeing in real time nations that are becoming goat nations right before our very eyes, which means that the Lord will be just in judging them. So if you are, or you have friends or somebody you know lives in those nations, especially some of our Canadians who watch, you need to pray for your nations. One, repent that they're participating in this. For us, Louisiana, we're a French cultural state. We have French ties. We're repenting for the behalf of France. UK, if you got British bloodline, repent there. And now Australian. So there's going to be more and more. You're going to see this lining up of nations against God's covenant. We're not talking about political Israel. We're talking about covenant Israel. And they say that you should divide that land. And God is not going to tolerate that. So that's a big battle that's going on right now. One more clip from Netanyahu about this issue, about the propaganda battle. Let me play this one.
I think there's an issue here. And the issue is many leaders tell me, look, we know you're right, but we can't stand, in the face of the public opinion in our country, especially European leaders. They tell me that over and over again. And I say,
well, that's not the clip. Hold on. I already played that one. I want to play one more where he deals with. Please,
I think there's an issue here. And the issue is many leaders tell me.
I'm sorry, I got it wrong there. Can you get me back into my screen? Okay, so let's pray for Israel today. The Gaza Strip issue is big. We've already seen a lot of the propaganda. It's coming out little by little where they're catching the media fraudulently covering it. I think it was a Washington, I think it's a Wall Street Journal, one of them. They posted it and they realized they made it up, and then they apologized, but they didn't apologize on this. So everybody that heard the lie did not hear the apology.
New York Times.
So was it
New York Times?
New York Times. That's what it was. Okay. So Zach, what's your any comments on what's going on in Israel? How we should stand right now?
I mean, the big thing is you're seeing a lot of pushback from world leaders to Israel, and this is kind of a common theme if you've paid attention to Israel. They decide to do something, all the world leaders push back, and Marco Rubio came out and said the statements by France and the statements by other nations of claiming that there is and needs to be a Palestinian state is kind of what is giving Hamas, and more so is what is giving Hamas life. Because other than that, they would come to the table and negotiate. But because they see that on the political spectrum and in the media, they're winning, even though on the battlefield they're not, they know, okay, we can hold out, we can hold out, we can hold out. But Israel's come to the point of decision naturally, legislatively within the Knesset, to say, okay, we need to go back and we need to get hostages. And that's kind of the focus. And they said that's been the focus from the very beginning. And obviously, the issue here is the divide here within the church, and which speaks to the divide here politically of, well, do you really stand with political Israel? Do you not? And in this instance, is look, you're standing for life in this case of the innocent, of those who were indiscriminately attacked. and who are being starved and then treated like Holocaust victims, being starved, being the emaciation of. There's been video clips of somebody who lost one of the survivors who's still there that they put a video out of just basically skin and bones is what he's gone into. But then you see videos of the quote unquote humanitarian crisis where, they have a buffet style of food right before them. There's also rumors that Hamas is taking it, selling it at exorbitant, inflated amounts back to the people who can possibly afford it. And I mean, I don't know how deep we want to go into the natural debate here on this issue, and then the support coming from those on the quote unquote woke right. It's very preposterous and it's very one-sided. And the issue is why the question that is not always answered is they point out, well, why does Israel do this? Why does Israel do that? And the point back is look, this stuff is happening in other countries, whether it be aid here from America or support from politicians. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who supports Israel is lost their allegiance. And this is kind of the big thing that you're seeing now is if you support, and you saw this from Mike Johnson last week as well, he's an agent of Israel because he goes to Israel and prays at the Wailing Wall, or President Trump's an agent of Israel, Ben Shapiro's an agent of Israel, works for the Mossad and all this stuff. Let's take a step back, is when the United States gives funding, we talked about it here before, gives funding to Israel, in those bills, it's required that they spend that money here back in America. Not only that, is a lot of these military aid deals that are put forward in Congress and pushed through, it bleeds back to military weapons development here for America. Okay, the Iron Dome, Israel is testing it. Well, what is in the long run wanting to be happened here in America is that the military wants to use that to protect America for the same type of attacks here and any other type of development of military weapons that they pour money into. Is there needs to be a market. You have to test it. And if America's not involved in war, and if there are those political allies or political opponents who don't want you to go into war, where are you going to test it? And that's not the only reason to support. And we see here we understand biblically this alignment, but the reality is we have to ask ourselves is what is the motive here for these people who are pushing back against this? And this is the sad thing that's coming to light.
I think also the fight for foreign aid, you brought that up. Let me tell you, this is somebody who's lobbied Congress on foreign aid. That's most of the time when I lobbied Congress, it was for foreign aid for Israel. That was my main goal. This is a law that most people don't understand about foreign aid. You have the Rand Pauls who say we shouldn't give any foreign aid, et cetera. But let me tell you what actually the law says. All foreign aid given to any nation, 90% of that money has to be spent in America. They're not just given a blank check and then go anywhere in the world and buy whatever they want to buy. They cannot do that. So it's really a supplement to our subsidy, a better way of putting it, for American businesses, whether it be military, whether it be supplies or whatever. So we're actually giving them money and we get it right back in our business sector. So always remember that when we talk about foreign aid. Okay, let's pivot here. We want to talk about President Trump's press conference that happened just about an hour ago. I watched it. It was an hour-long press conference. And he has declared a state of emergency, type of state of emergency over the city of Washington, D.C., and he has stepped in and taken over the police, taken over almost the entire city as far as the governmental side of it. And so the press conference, let me play one clip where he says this, what's going to happen, and gives you an idea.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough. and they know what's happening. And they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
One thing
I'm announcing
that he
is
said that I thought was really important. He said, Washington, D.C. is a microcosm of the nation, and if we don't have law and order in D.C., if we have filth and crime in D.C., he said it goes through the whole country. And I don't think he understood what he was saying prophetically or spiritually, is because it's talking about the oil flows down Aaron's beard. When it talks about authority, what's there flows all the way down. I believe if they deal with this properly, it's going to affect the spirit realm, and it's going to change the perception of how we should deal with these social issues that we have. And if he pulls it off, which I think he will, I have no doubt that's going to happen. I believe that it could trickle down all across America. Other cities could say, hey, they did it in D.C., we can do it in our cities. He went on to say about how European countries and other people, how they go out every day and wash their sidewalks and clean up. We see that when we go to Europe. Literally, store owners are out there cleaning up their streets and everything else because they want their city to look well and be well. And I think this is a picture we're called to pray for the welfare of our cities and our nation. And I think this is a manifestation of that, where you're starting to see the president step into this role. Now, it's going to be kind of crazy what he's doing because he's taken over here. Here is, I forget her name, but she's going to be taking over part of this.
Pam Bondi.
The judge. She was on the Fox. I always forget her name. Let me play it here. Share this one. How do I share that? There we go. Okay.
Very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Madam Attorney General, and to all my partners here. We all want the same thing. We all want a safe city. We want a safe capital. We want to be able to bring our families here. We want to be able to come and enjoy the history that makes this place great. And unfortunately, we are not in that position right now. And Mr. President, I want to thank you for taking the step that we need right now to make criminals understand that they are not going to get away with it anymore. And I'm not going to stand here and go over and over the cases. But what I can tell you is this. I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are. They can be in DuPont Circle, but they know that we can't touch them. Why? Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I convict someone of shooting another person with an illegal gun on a public bus in the chest, intent to kill. I convict him. And you know what the judge gives him? Probation. Says you should go to college. We need to go after the D.C. Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this concept of, no cash bail. We need to recognize that the people who matter are the law-abiding. But it's not going to end today because the president is going to do everything we need to do to make sure that these emboldened criminals understand we see you, we're watching you, and we're going to change the law to catch you. And my final note is this. These kids understand that the jurisdiction is through the State Attorney General, Brian Schwab. I did a poster of the young man from Doge who was beaten bloody with a severe concussion, a broken nose. And then I did a poster of what happens to those kids because I can't arrest them. I can't. Do yoga and crafts. It changes today. Thank you, Mr.
Whoa. She said it clearly, didn't she? It changes today. So let's mark this day down. The 11th day of August, 2025. We're taking back our city, our capital. Now, I realize they're doing a political thing, but I think it's a spiritual act. God loves justice. He hates injustice. And because of this, we're going to see a shift in our nation. I believe this is very powerful of what is happening here. And we have to celebrate what they're doing in D.C. right now. And there's a lot of work to be done. I think Congress needs to get involved. Zach, why don't you speak to that? We gotta make sure this becomes law. It's not just an executive order that gets washed away, because this is a reinstitution of the way D.C. used to be prior to 1972. So now we're going back to that place where the feds are going to control the city.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the argument is as well, DC should be run on its own. The reality is before the overturn and giving it over to kind of its own little city and district, it was controlled by federal government because you had so many national representatives who were there that it needed to come under, and it needed to be under federal control, and that's kind of what it was meant to be. And so if you kind of separate it out, and would hopefully eliminate the call and cry for certain seats, which would sway a certain political, but that's a separate issue. The more reality is this would be a way in 4 states like California, Chicago, and other states or New York, who have these same problems as you're seeing here manifested in DC, of how to attack them. And what this is leading to is just like the attack she talked about there on the Doge employee who got brutally beaten up for defending what is believed to be, I remember, it was a female, some rumors that it was his girlfriend, but I mean, kudos for the kid for stepping in and protecting it. And the fact that nobody else stepped in when they saw this and or see this is another issue, but that's besides the point. But the reality is states like California, New York, Illinois, I mean, the list goes on where they let these criminals go in and attack and get off scot-free, catch and release, and not actually uphold the justice system and allow righteousness to bring forward to kind of deal with these acts or the thievery, et cetera, things like that. And this is why there are those in California who are trying to, and in New York, trying to stand up to this. But when you have these rogue judges, and this is what this will get to, in D.C. is dealing with this stuff and hopefully allowing those who live there to understand that, hey, there's kind of a new sheriff in town, some new rules that need to be applied and understood here. And so hopefully the rest of the states can take this as an example of how to overdo it. And then the question becomes is okay, if this isn't dealt with in those states, and Trump has talked about this in states like Oregon and in Seattle, where you see the same type of things, during the CHOP Summer of Love, should he have sent in the Federal Reserve, the Coast Guard, or what was it? Troops, basically to defend federal buildings and other institutions and assets that were there for the federal government. So this starts to bring up a question of, if there is an unruly judge, unruly police department who's not upholding the law, what then does either the governor of the state do, other officials within the counties do, or the cities? And so this is something to pay attention to see how it's done. And then the other thing, not just to on the surface see what it's done, but look at the stats. Okay, what are the crime rates at like now? What's the change when you actually uphold the law? What's the change when you actually see these judges dealt with and rule by principle rather than by feeling? And so this will be something huge to pay attention to in the days ahead and pray into, because our representatives are there and they're under attack, and some of them have even been attacked. If you remember a few years ago, Rand Paul and his wife were, I think, had something thrown at them. Others have been attacked before. So then this increases the need for Secret Service, which means more taxpayer dollars, et cetera, stuff to protect people. And so this could hopefully alleviate that, and we still pay taxes for all the funding for the police departments are there. And if you remember, kind of the last point I'll end on is this is kind of where the whole BLM kind of stuff kind of took off, is some of the things that they saw in DC and the fact that nobody did anything with it during COVID. And then you started seeing those similar things of painting the streets, of cops doing this, burning down buildings, and et cetera, stuff like that. And so this is kind of a key point of the political spectrum and debate happening before our eyes.
Okay, so great things happening for D.C. and our nation's capital. I think that's critical today. I just feel like it's a first fruit day. 8th month, August. 8 is, we always say new beginnings, but 8 is really a restart because you have 7 is perfection, 7 days in the creation story. The 8th day, something new starts. So we really feel like this month, it's a new start for America, especially for our nation's capital. And I think if we can fix it there, it can stream all the way across the country. I'm so excited about that. All right.
Yeah, somebody put in here about Cincinnati, the same thing. We just saw that happen. So this would be an issue of, okay, people in Cincinnati, people in Ohio, this is kind of how you deal with this stuff. And this is where you look at it, and it can be an example. Because what's going to happen about this is, okay, you have Republican lawmakers, people in those counties, in these places say, okay, how do we deal with this? And they're going to go ask the administration, and you're going to have not only the top level people, within the Trump administration, but it's going to be their aides are now going to be able to advise those within these districts and these cities. And so this is it's good for them to see. They actually have hands-on experience of how to do it rather than just theory, because a lot of this stuff also, a lot of Judge Perino, all the other people, Pete Hegseth, they're newscasters. They've talked about this stuff a lot. So now they're able to get their hands in there, get dirty. Let's see if you can do it. You've been saying this stuff for a while. Obviously, we have faith that they will be able to do it because they have past actual real-world experience in doing these things. And so it'll kind of squash a lot of those people who about all this stuff about whether they have the legitimacy of being able to do it or not.
Okay, so we're going to pivot now to the delegation of the Texans that have run to, the legislators that have run to Illinois mainly, with Governor Pritzker there, who is a staunch liberal Republican leaning towards socialism, et cetera. So Illinois is the most gerrymandered state in America. And here they are calling Texas evil, a threat to democracy, all the different things they're saying, and yet they're the worst at it. And this is where the Valley decision is going to be, because you have these other states, Maryland, some of the New England states, California, who are threatening if Texas does this, that they're going to take even more seats. I think California has 40% Republicans. They probably have about 20% of their congressmen are Republicans. So you talk about injustice, it's there. And for you guys in California, that's a point of intercession that you can cry out to the Lord for justice in California. So he was on Meet the Press yesterday, and they actually called him out on, I want you to watch how slick he is and how he knows how to spin the story. But she is a liberal commentator, but she calls him out on his issue here. So let's listen to this.
Every major group that grades the fairness of congressional maps gives your state an F. Common Cause, a nonpartisan government watchdog, even says your map, and I'm going to quote, represents a nearly perfect model for everything that can go wrong with redistricting. And I guess the question is, you talk about preserving democracy. How do you preserve democracy if you're using the same tactics that you've criticized Texas Republicans for?
Calls him out on it. The very thing he's going to ask. Now, he's got a great spin here if you're a liberal. Most liberals don't know how to spin like this. They will stumble with their words, and he already knew these type of questions are going to be asked, so he has canned answers that he's going to bring out.
But as I say, what they're talking about is a distraction. The reality is that the violation of people's voting rights is what Texas is attempting to do. That's what's wrong with their effort.
They're doing nothing to violate their voting rights. Just because you change the district does not mean you don't get to vote. You still get to vote.
Right now. And the fact that the president of the United States knows it.
Now, here we go. And this is the spin. They immediately go to Trump bashing. Mandani's doing this in New York. They asked him about Cuomo. They asked him about Adams. They asked him his questions. And when you watch the interviews, he goes to Trump because he knows that's his calling card. He knows he can get energy and money that way.
And nevertheless is asking them to do it. That is right now. Democracy is at stake.
Democracy is at stake. That's their statement. Well, we know that's not true. It is not at stake. What's at stake here is the loss of democracy, and it's already started in Illinois. It started in Maryland. It started in New England. I think they said New England may wash out all Republican congressmen completely, and they're all Democrats. Now, you talk about a threat to democracy when you don't allow true democracy to happen. And we talked about this last week about the districting that's going on there. And so this is a huge problem, Zach.
Yeah, and this is kind of the new theme for Democrats. This is scary. Is they're talking about how, democracy is going to be lost if we don't do X, if we don't do Y. There's a video I saw James Carville talking about if we don't pack the courts, if we don't add, gerrymander and add seats to get rid of and wash out, add the 4 seats day one come 2028. If Democrats don't do what they can, because they know the voice of the people will vote against what they want if you don't rig the system. And he's one of the best people to know because he kind of has been in this game a long time. And he's a voice from Louisiana. And so that's something, for one, for us to repent from. But two, is also realizing that it's what they're doing is trying to stoke fear in people of this idea of, oh, you're going to lose your freedoms. You're going to lose your ability to vote. You're going to lose your rights and your freedoms. And what they're talking about and what they're placating towards is they're talking about illegals in a lot of these instances. And this is why they're losing a lot of the black and Hispanic vote on the Democratic side, is because what they're doing is they're saying people who've come here legally, to the side, that they want to have these censuses where illegals are counted in the census, and then you can kind of redistrict around that. And so it's kind of a whole play there. You have to understand what they're saying versus what we may think when they say something as far as, oh, we're losing democracy. It's like, no, we're really not. But then to somebody who thinks like them and who listens to them, well, oh, yeah, really, they're not going to look, the second layer, third layer. They're just going to look at that first layer and say, oh, wow, they're really saying, because people's lives are going at a fast pace. They're trying to keep up with the bills and stuff, so that they listen to and hear these clips. And so they don't take into full context of what they're talking about. And so the sad thing is people believe them. In many places, whether it be in red states or blue states, about when people say, oh, we need to, we're going to lose our democracy, we need to do this. They're like, yeah, let it happen. They're not really understanding the ramifications of what that really means, of allowing somebody to, make a decision like that and rule that way. And so we have to understand that this is kind of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to kind of want to pack it one way. And the reality is look, people got to wake up, and people have to understand, just like in the D.C. situation, is understanding how can you combat this, righteousness and justice to be brought forward here, and understand, to be able to read between the lines. And the fact that a liberal broadcaster is kind of calling it out is, one, they're obviously realizing, they're losing viewers over hand and foot faster than they can breathe. Look at what's happening at CBS with Colbert going down. Dude had a $200 million budget and lost. It was in the negative $40 million. So the newscasters and news organizations are realizing they need to turn from this. But then also in this instance of Illinois is the #1 state to gerrymander. This is something that I think people are kind of calling them to getting mad for Texas for doing what they can legally do. And I went back and looked at, last week, did some research about how historically the census has been once a decade. The Federalist Papers go back in, James Madison and others talked about how ultimately when you needed to have a census is if there was like a major change. And Trump was in Florida with DeSantis, and a lot of the census that's actually there is not accurate. And so places like Florida, New York, and even California, it might be time to do another census. Historically, it's better to keep it to once a decade. That way you can say, okay, you have some stability. But if there's been major changes, i.e. like during COVID, there might be a way forward. And the founding fathers believed that and allowed for those cases because they ultimately wanted to be the proper representation, but there has to be a ramification and a reality for that, for causing that change. And it's really up to Congress to do that. But for now, they're going to stick to once a decade.
You know, and I think for us conservatives, we're obviously having a lot of victories right now. But this Valley Decision title we gave today is so critical because Zach has a video we're going to show here from James Carville of the plan of the left on how they think they can, quote, take back and bring democracy back to America. You have the conservatives who are trying to do the right thing here as a whole. I'm not saying everything they're doing is right, but this is where the Valley Decision, America could go either way according to this, because if the Dems pull off what Carville's, it's a coup, really, is what he's talking about. And there's others. Beto O'Rourke in Texas is another guy that does the same thing, where they're talking about this, about what they're going to do to take over. And I think this is the movement here. You need to listen to what they're saying. Let me play Beto. Well, you go ahead. Let's play Carville and let's talk about that. And I'll
Admit
do
states
here.
into the Union.
The Democrats talk about democracy, and you have these people, importance of democracy and preserving democracy and saving democracy. Well, the truth of the matter is, people are right when they say this democracy is really imperfect. And they're going to have to do, if the Democrats win the presidency, the Senate and the House in 2028, which is not impossible. I don't know if you say likely or possible. I don't know what word you know, but it's certainly not impossible. They are just going to have to unilaterally add Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia states. They're going to have to, the Congress does give, the Constitution gives Congress power over federal elections. I don't think they can redistrict, but they're things they're going to do. They're going to have to do it. They're just going to have to do it. And they may have to expand the court to 13 members. Any of those things in isolation, I would be skeptical about. I would be cautious about. I would say, well, I don't know if that's the greatest idea in the world. You're opening Pandora's box, or all kinds of things. If you want to save democracy, I think you got to do all of those things, because we just are moving further and further away from being anything close to democracy.
And that's scary to hear, packing the courts. And a lot of this comes on the heels of allowing transition and allowing the state to decide that kids can transition without parents and knowledge or advice in any sense of the matter. I mean, you're talking about adding states, adding D.C. as a state, adding Puerto Rico as a state. He's talking about doing that day one, adding 4 more seats. And so this is quite alarming to see, and talking about quote-unquote democracy, which we are not. We are a republic, and so we have to understand that. And this is where they want to get into of, hey, we kind of shift this around, and yes, we can, but you then would have to have a convention of states, and which would mean 2/3 of the states would have to vote for it to agree to it. So what he talks about there in the federalization of Congress over federal elections, that kind of gets into a sticky situation there, where you have the Federalist Papers talking about, well, those things should be run by the states. So you can challenge a lot of these things that he's saying here, and obviously he would have his argument for it and against it. I'm kind of being high level here, but the reality is this is their game plan.
Yeah, that's it.
This is what we need to make sure we're aware of, and understand that he is, maybe he doesn't have the most inroads in with current Democrats right now, but if you look at Mandani and AOC and Elizabeth Warren and others like him, they're going along with ilks like this. They're going along with types of ideas. If you talk about Mandani in New York, socializing grocery stores. I mean, that's Cuba. Mm-hmm. We've seen this play out. This does not bode well. We've seen this in Venezuela. Go talk to your friends in Venezuela. This does not play out well. So if you want to starve, then yeah, go right for that. And this is a scary stuff. And so we have to realize and understand that, look, the political advice, the advice that those on the left are getting is to go further and further down the rabbit hole that causes them to be able to lose the seats that they're in right now. And this is something that, we got to say, hey, is this the road we want to go down as Democrats? Or do we want to kind of get back to the same footing of where we can come to an agreement, we can come to a situation where we continue to allow freedoms, or do we continue to take freedoms away in order so that certain people can stay in power, which is just a power grab and very alarming, and something that the founders would have 100% agreed to stand against, which is why you have the three branches of governments and a balance of power.
Well, let's play the Beto O'Rourke comment. It's pretty
Next
good.
time we win power, we're going to drive that car like we stole it. We're going to
Did you hear that? We're going to drive that car like we stole it.
legalize every dreamer's parents, every hardworking American doing backbreaking work that makes this country so goddamn.
I'm sorry about the cursing. He just out there, and this is really their plan, is to take over the nation this way. And they call that democracy. That's the hypocrisy of what they're saying. So we've got to pray that agenda that Carville talked about, Beto O'Rourke and others talked about, that it would be revealed so that we'll know, the people will know what's going on. We're headed toward a direction of socialism, communism. We've warned here about live not by lies. We did a lot of podcasts on that. Live streams on that. Fox had two people who came one out of China, I think other out of Venezuela. And I want to play a little clip here where they talk about their fear of Mamdani becoming mayor because of what's going on there. And I don't want to be a part of that. Let me get that one up here. That's not the one I want. Hold on. Here we go. I lost my screen. Just a second. There it is. Let me share this tab. All right. Listen to these people's story.
Well, the people who vote for socialism are the ones who never lived it, who never suffered from the hunger and poverty and the lack of freedom and police state. So those people should be educated about history better. That's failure of our American education system. Our kids don't know the history, and they bought into free stuff provided by government. That's how Mao sold the socialism, communism to millions Chinese, and the millions of them starving to death by his central planning socialist policies. So I'm running because I don't want this country become the country I left. And I don't want anybody to take away my gun rights. That's a God-given rights. I will never compromise.
So here you have a Chinese girl calling it out, and I think which is very important as far as what they're going through. And then he has I think he's from Venezuela. Let me play this portion.
Down of this Democrat mayoral primary in New York City this week, you're not necessarily seeing the working class. You're not seeing black voters, Hispanic voters. You're not seeing them showing out necessarily for Mamdani, but you're seeing the white liberals, and those are the ones that were celebrating, cheering up and down for him. You got to help me understand, what is it about that group of people that makes them cheer so ferociously for socialism?
Yeah, thank you all, and thank you for having me. Good to see you all again. Look, what really concerns me about this is what you said, Tommy, that it is really highly educated young people who turned out for Mamdani. And it is really not shocking because I went to Colombia for my PhD, and I saw it myself. People there are the most supportive of socialism. And the reason is because of our colleges here in America. That was one of the most shocking things I saw when I first came to America in 2016, was that it was higher education that was captured by Marxists. And so what happened in Venezuela, that people voted for a socialist regime, unlike in China or unlike in the Soviet Union, can clearly happen here too. And Mamdani might not be able to turn New York City into Caracas because he's mayor and not tyrant, but the point is Americans are willing to vote for someone like him. And today is New York City, tomorrow is the rest of America.
Well, I think that's the point I wanted to say. It sounds like it's far-fetched to say that, but I agree with what he said. Today, New York, the rest, it could be the whole country. We already have a candidate in Minneapolis that's just like him. We have other candidates out there. The Chicago mayor's like that. He's already proven the destruction of the city of Chicago with his policies. So this is not a far-fetched idea that he brought up there. And again, it is our education system that has given these people the platform that they operate out of, and we have to be wise enough to pray accordingly.
Yeah, you're seeing it with kind of a separation of education styles. Is people and millennials, they kind of lean this way, and those who go to higher educations, but the those who don't go to your quote unquote elite schools, they're kind of running from this. The Gen Zs, they're kind of abandoning universities, which is why places like Harvard, Columbia, Yale, they're all, and even like Notre Dame, as an example, is they're using federal funds to survive when they have billions of dollars in their endowment. They're going to be struggling, and just recently, had to pay millions of dollars. Is the reality is look, parents need to look at the results and kind of this. A big thing coming out, we talked about it last night a little bit, is the student loan crisis. You have these people who are now going to be forced to pay it back because the federal government is saying enough of, kind of the freeloading and not paying back your bills. And a lot of people are thinking, well, the government's going to pay back my student loans. The Bernie Sanders, Bernie bros who said, yeah, the government's just going to pay me back. And people have just straight up stopped. And there's some people who are in horrible positions, which gets into the question of the federal government, but that's a separate issue. But the point I want to get back to is the fact that there needs to be an analysis for people when you look at obviously the universities, but parents to rise up. And there's a dream Pastor Regas had during COVID about how, look, this next generation, the mothers are going to rise up and teach their children, and more so be that mother bear that Scripture talks about, of protecting its babies and its children. And so this is one of the things that can hopefully, we can see these results now and hopefully pray and intercede and then be reversed for the next generation, so that you can kind of combat that and overcome that before this continues to go down this cycle. And that's a thing of looking even at primary education, and there's ways to do it at the state level to prevent the kind of brainwashing even in public schools. There's some things to look at there. I know I'm kind of bringing up a lot of subjects here, but the reality is these two races bring up a lot of these topics, and you have two people who have lived this life that people want to take this nation down, and they're saying no. I think it's wise for us as Americans to listen to somebody who's lived this. And to take a step back further is you take President Trump and his family. They come, his first wife, Don Jr. and Eric's mom, had their grandparents come from Czech Republic and former USSR countries, and they've been there and they know this. So this is something that President Trump, knows personally. Obviously, he's seen it through business, but so have his kids. So, and even though they're not perfect, but they understand this, and I think it's a great lesson for previous generations to teach. My generation and future generations to understand the realities of, hey, this is the reality. This is what it looks like. And they always say, everyone's a liberal until they get their first paycheck, because then they start realizing, oh, you mean this is the government takes this how much out of my paycheck? Yeah. So the reality is the Americans need to understand the realities of what they're voting for, and then not buy into the lies that they're being told from people like J.D. Pritzker, who are on the news dissuading them, saying things, because what they're doing is they're saying, well, Trump's doing this, and they're not explaining the full context. Right. And I'll give this one example. Is CNN came out and said, well, Trump's going after and taking away the citizenship of people who have come here legally. Well, there's some truth to that. And then they're saying, well, they're going to come for you if you've come here legally from another country. Well, the reality is what they're doing is they're going after people who lied on the naturalization process. So when they were becoming a citizen, they lied. A lot of them, the ones specifically that they're going after, are child predators. And they're saying they were child predators in their former country, and they became child predators after. But because they're citizens, you have to deal with them here. And what Trump's doing is, and the administration is doing, is they're finding, well, you lied on your process because you were a criminal in your other nation. And one of the questions is, are you being truthful? Are you saying, you are who you say you are? You have a clean pass, because they want to vet who's coming in. And they're finding those people. And so CNN says, well, they're taking away their citizenship, so that means they're taking away from you. Well, the reality is they're taking away from people who lied through the process, who said they weren't lying. And so they're legally have the grounds to take away that citizenship. And that's just one example. And so it's something that we have to pray for clarity for people. But then also coming into these votes is people have to, in New Hampshire and New York, have to recognize of, all right, do we want to go down this road of socialism in the days ahead?
And Mandani, they asked him a question once about billionaires, and he said, no, there doesn't need to be any billionaires. Well, in Meet the Press, I don't have the clip, but they asked Governor Pritzker about that because Governor Pritzker's a billionaire. And they said, you're supporting candidates like this, and you're a billionaire. What do you have to say to that? And, of course, he knew how to spin it. He said, oh, it's not about how much money you have. It's your policy. And he began to go down that road. But the fact is, the hypocrisy is screaming from the left. And fortunately, there's not a lot of traction for what they're doing. Let me play this clip. They asked on Bill Mayer's show, they had Dr. Phil and Stephen A. Smith, both them, well, Smith is a Democrat. I don't know what Dr. Phil is, about Buttigieg if he was to run for president. And they share the stats of what's going on. So let me play this clip. I don't know how to get it up. There we go.
Democratic primary voters, 16% would support Buttigieg. That's the highest of any candidate. Pete Buttigieg.
I don't believe it. I think that's just a poll number. I can't see that happening.
Well, okay, but wait. 16%. Black voters, 0. 0. You don't usually see 0 anywhere. 0's low.
For who? What is this?
For Buttigieg. Okay, explain that. I mean, why do black voters have this? I mean, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's under-indexing a little bit with black voters, yeah.
A little. What is that all about?
He doesn't move us. I respect the man. I've interviewed him before. Very nice man, highly intelligent. But you gotta be able to move us, bruh. He doesn't move us. Well, you can speculate as to why that is. I'm not going there. He doesn't move us.
Okay. I think for Stephen A. is a great. They're trying to get him to run for president too. But I think this is the shocking part. Buttigieg is the highest polling Democrat that there is. He doesn't have a shot. But I'm just telling you, that's how far the left has gone. That's their top candidate so far. I believe they're going to throw a governor up in 2028, whether it be Newsom or Shapiro. Some Democratic governor will probably be the candidate. I think that's the only chance they have anyway. But that's the battle that we're going on. And I think for us to know that they don't have momentum, we've got to pray that we continue, the people of God who have biblical worldview, that we continue to have momentum and begin to take back territories that have been stolen from the American people and what we believe for why God created this country, the original intent of this nation. That's what we got to fight for, and that's why we come here every Monday on this Pipeline Report to say we're raising up an army that's going to fight for those purposes in the days ahead. Anything else before we close, Zach?
I think the big thing to recognize and remember is that there is a move in the right direction, but there's also some wheat or some tares among the wheats. And right now you're seeing those kind of be exposed in this season. And we'll see as we move forward into this 2026 cycle before the midterms of where people lie. Because now that Trump's in office, you're going to start seeing the differences from those on the right and the left and seeing what side and what type of candidates they're willing to put forward, which means what policies and what ways they want to affect certain lifestyles and more so effective freedoms moving forward. Because now the battle becomes, okay, Trump's in office, let's let him do his thing. But now the battle becomes after. And then obviously Democrats are already looking at that. They've kind of conceded, okay, we're going to stall as much as we can right now, going to stall as much as we can come the 26 midterms. But then they're looking forward to 28. And I think it's an interesting perspective. A lot of times we like to look today, this week, this month, but they're looking 4 or 5 years down the road. And that's one of those things where we got to get into that timeline, get in that place of the Lord, to let him, one, redeem us, to get in the mindset of where we need to be, but then also start looking forward and recognizing what seasons and how we can pray ahead into those seasons and look forward to what's coming in the days ahead.
So August is our Valley of Decision month. There's so many things happening. We didn't get into President Trump and his trip to Alaska Friday to meet Putin. We'll see how that all plays out. Maybe we'll talk about it next Monday after it's all been said and done. But thanks for watching on the Pipeline Report today. Each and every Monday, 12 noon Central, we come to you. We believe our nation is in that decision, and we want to go the way of the Lord, the biblical worldview that God has called us to have. That's what we try to present here. So we bless you. We'll be back here again next Monday at 12 noon Central with the Pipeline Report.